Hello, you Malty, memorable millennial malt moment. That's you. And a big thank you for the malt moment mention to artificial frequencies. So, this is Ralphie Review 1018. You are very welcome, particularly if you enjoy sipping a decent single malt Scotch whisky, which is what I generally review on this channel, because this is a quality spirits review channel in which I share primarily my experience and a little bit of knowledge, and I help you basically get better value for the money you spend. That's what this channel is really fundamentally all about. It's coming from, of course, the bothy, the whisky bothy, somewhere in the middle of the Irish Sea. Right, and my whisky today, without any further flannel and fuss, is Ardmore Portwood matured 12-year-old single malt. Ardmore is a Highland distillery. Some people think it's a Speyside distillery because it's near the border of the Speyside region, but it is in fact a Highland distillery, an East Highland distillery, which tends to suggest that it's going to be complex, have a lot of character, and not be too sweet. If you see Ardmore, you will generally see it in the supermarkets and generally available as the Ardmore Legacy, bottled at 40% as a non-age statement version. And my advice to you, malt mates, is don't touch it with a barge pole. Unless you're buying single malt whisky to mix with Coca-Cola, ginger beer and Monster energy drinks, because the Legacy really isn't good. The thing is, when you taste it and you're disappointed by it, it tends to put you off the whole brand completely because your experience has been a negative one. But unfortunately, the Legacy version is the main ambassador for this brand, which is probably one reason why they don't sell too much of it, and when they do, it's in discount. It's what you get, and it's primarily down to the owners called Beam Suntory, who are a corporate multinational, and they work the only way that corporate multinationals can, through bureaucracy and departments and all the rest of it. And inevitably, it is the nature, and I'm not blaming them for it, it's just the nature of the beast, is that they sanitise the product. When they produce it, they produce on economy, everything's tightly controlled, to the extent that they budget for the casks they mature their whisky in. So in other words, the quality of the casks is really not a priority. And by the way, this is an opinion, don't get all uppity, I'm just giving you an opinion. Because I just don't want you disappointed if you go out and buy a bottle. That's why I'm saying this. And they tend to focus on yield of production. So the yield will be, how much alcohol they can get out per tonne of barley, rather than how much flavour they can get out of per tonne of barley. And it's a real shame, because Ardmore Distillery is a true, authentic, classic Scotch whisky distillery, predominantly Victorian, absolutely drenched in charisma and presence and all the beautiful stuff you want from a distillery visit. They've got great staff who'll give you a good tour, but really, if you go to the distillery, if you can, taste the distillery only bottling even before you buy it, because it's the situation at Bowmore is mirrored at Ardmore. They're both owned by the same company, and this is basically the sanitisation of the experience that corporations impose, and it's just a really bad habit they have, which generates greater conversation online amongst the true whisky aficionados who are frequently disappointed. But this is another version of Ardmore. So I don't want to dwell too much in the negative, although it exists and you do need to know about it. This is so important. You don't have a lot of choice in the Ardmore range. It's the legacy, the basic inferior stuff, or it's the far better quality 12-year-old portwood matured that has been unchill filtered. And where's my steampunker? I need my steampunker here to actually give you the absolute authenticity here. Double cask matured in American oak ex-bourbon barrels and finished in European port casks. Bottled at 46%, non-chill filtered, 12 years old. I do believe there's a little bit of E150 caramel colouring in this, but not too much. Thank goodness. What do we have in the nose? Now, I've reviewed this before, but it's been about 7 years since I reviewed it. I last reviewed it in Ralphie Review 622, which was in January 2017. So we've moved on quite a bit. Has this improved any? Yes, it's improved slightly. It's certainly a little bit sanitised. It's light on the nose, lighter than it should be, considering that it is a peated Highland whisky. It should have more density, more complexity, more savoury and umami, but it isn't. That has been engineered out of the experience, unfortunately. So what we get is something which is malty, sort of quite deep malt notes, a hint of phenolics, primarily smoke in the background, although not as prominent as it really should be, and a light strawberry, cherry, red fruit type presence coming from the port casks, of course, which fortunately have been reasonably active. Altogether, it's pleasant enough, including the fact that it's ripe red fruits, so there's a certain sweetness in the nose. When we taste it for the first time, sweet and sour, arrival, light fruit initially, very quickly fades, becomes soft, flat, sour. There's not enough port cask influence. There's just enough to make its presence known, but not enough to make it properly matured. For 12 years old, there should be more going on in terms of the development and the finish. The finish is crisp, flat, and really an indicator as to the general mediocrity of the casks being used. But they're competent enough. They'll just about do the job. But I have tasted infinitely better Ardmores. And my advice, right before I go any further, before I add water, is just have a look amongst the independent bottlers, but be very careful what you buy. Go to whiskybase.com for reviews, because the quality of casks that the independent bottlers get from Beam Suntory are really not good. And also, unfortunately, because of the thinness of production, because the yield is focused on alcoholic volume rather than flavour, that phenolic presence tends to fade very quickly in independent bottling casks, unless there's a lot of serious cask management going on and mentoring. I've actually got a cask of Ardmore in my stash, and it's 14 years going on 8. That's how little activity the cask's doing. But I'm just waiting for a really, really good empty cask from Ardmore. It's for someone else to bottle a really good Ardmore. I'll see if I can buy that cask and literally up the signature. My goodness, it needs it. One reason I'm reviewing this is because it's available, it's accessible. Big companies tend to have their whiskies available in the on the global market at a relatively reasonable price. So it's not obscure and hard to find like many of the generally better quality new distillery bottlings, where they're far more proactive and serious about their cask investment. But it's competent. With the amount of whiskey I've been drinking over the decades, and inevitably I'm disappointed because I know the provenance of this. But for someone who's less experienced in whiskey, it's maybe 2 or 3 years into the journey, I would say this is going to be quite palatable, but it's not a patch on what it could be. It just isn't. And I really feel for the staff at the distillery, because they're doing what they can. I've added a spoonful of water with a magic spoon, 5 millilitres. It's really helping the nose now. It's getting that superficial flat cask, sour cask, real kind of cask that have been lying about for a bit before they were used, note. And it's now letting me access a bit more of the signature of the spirit itself, and particularly the presence of the pot casks. They're becoming a little bit more prominent, and my goodness, you need everything you can to kind of help this on its way. Huge improvement. Instantly. A huge improvement. It's, if you drink your whiskey neat, this is a bad whiskey. If you dilute your whiskey and you slow things down, you're going to get a far better whiskey. And I'm talking neat, I would give this 76 out of 100. Adding water, I'm going to give it 80 out of 100. That's how much of a difference it makes when you add a drop of water. Thank goodness they bottled it at 46%. At 40%, this would be an absolute waste of your money, whatever the price. And let's just go back a bit into the flavour here, because I've actually been quite negative about this whiskey, and deservedly so. Deservedly so. I've tasted this in the past. I know how good it gets. In fact, if you want a good version of Ardmore, you need to go to auction and buy a bottle of this. This will be a feature, right? A feature in my next review. This is a legacy bottle of blended Teacher's Scotch whisky from the 1980s, right? When they made really good Ardmore, because it was under previous ownership. And because this brand, its entire reputation rested on this distillery. I'll tell you more about that in the extras. Let's put this back in the shelf. Taste. More fresh fruit. Primarily strawberry, cranberry. The sour note's more articulate. It's more crispy. It's more grain sour and oak bitter. It has more activity in the development, thank goodness. And it's a little bit more interesting in the finish. It's got some intense grapefruit oil in the finish. There's a very slight gingeriness in there. And the peatiness is fairly zesty, although it could certainly be more complex. You really feel this entire brand is very, very strictly portion controlled in the production budget. It comes across way more than the producers would like us to recognise. But it is what it is. And you'll find it in travel retail. You'll find it in some of the high street specialist whisky shops. If you're looking for an alternative to Islay for someone that's maybe a year into their single malt journey, consider this one. Whatever you do, do not buy the Legacy unless you want a bottle which represents a badly presented single malt whisky, just for a point of reference. And there's no harm in that, because if you have a sip of a bad whisky, before you have a sip of a good whiskey in another glass. The good whiskey tastes all the better for it because your palate's been primed with the inferior experience. It's what it is, you know. I'm just giving an opinion, and I know it's quite scathing actually, but hey, it deserves it. Nothing against the distillery, nothing against the staff there. If Ardmore was owned by a small distillery company who were focusing on quality, we'd have a completely enhanced, rejuvenated experience of this brand. But unfortunately, at the moment, that's unlikely to happen. It's just the nature of all the corporations to sanitise the delivery of their brands. And it's the nature of human bureaucracy that the decisions are made by people who never roll barrels. They never bother going into a warehouse because it's a dirty place. And they might get their shoes dirty, you know. Heaven help us. These are people in ivory towers and offices who basically they look at the figures and say, how can we squeeze more blood out this stone? It's what it is. Don't kid yourself, by the way. It is what it is, what it is. And if we know this, we, maltmates, we are the ones that are empowered because we don't create delusional, self-deceiving expectations as to what a brand is, and then we buy a bottle and we pay good money for it, and then we spend half the bottle puzzling over it, deciding whether we actually enjoy it or not, when in fact we're not enjoying it. But we're trying to rationalise we are, when all our senses of smell and taste and our instincts are telling us we aren't. Hey, and don't tell me you haven't been there, because yes, you have, and it will be happening again to you before too long. Cheers. Let's give this a malt mark. Last time I gave this 82. I'm going to be generous. I'm going to give this 81. There we are. That's a malt mark. It's such a shame because to get a good Ardmore these days, you've got to go to the independent bottlers like Gordon MacPhail's Signatory and a few of the small independent bottlers, but it's all down to their custodianship and the fact that they get the spirit younger and then can match it and tie it in with a really decent cask, which is going to be sympathetic to the maturation of the whisky. And that's the way it goes. That's just the way it is. Cheers, folks. They also do an unpeated version, actually, of Ardmore called Ardlair. But we never see that. That would be interesting, but not a corporate version. It would have to be straight from the cask. And anything else I want to add? The final thing that I would add is, don't be put off visiting the distillery itself, because they do a really good tour. They really do. The staff there, they're good people, and the distillery's an absolute delight to visit. But it's the owners. It's just the ownership. It's just so unfortunate. And unfortunately, this degrading of Scotch whisky's legacy due to the involvement of corporations, it can only get worse over time. And it will. I'm Ralphie. Thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.